Even if there were a perfect candidate, identifying that person with certainty is impossible due to numerous factors and unknowns. Candidates for the papacy each have different strengths and weaknesses, and the next papacy will unfold differently depending on the cardinal's choice. There may not be a single best choice or one that is humanly knowable. However, once a selection is made, a new mode of divine will come into play. For instance, in marriage. Once you exchange vows, it is God's will that you treat that person as your spouse. The possibilities before marriage reduce to a single person who becomes your divinely ordained spouse. God ordains that you be spouses at the moment. The vows are exchanged, and what God has joined together, let man not separate. It then becomes your job to make the marriage work, not to dwell on what-ifs. Similarly, when a man accepts his election as pope, he becomes the divinely ordained pope, and it is the church's duty to support him in making the papacy work. Spouses are not perfect, and neither are popes. Just as every marriage requires work, so does every papacy. Although the timing of the next conclave is unknown, several implications can be drawn. First, we can be confident that the cardinals seek God's guidance and that He will provide. Second, even if a suboptimal choice is made, God will ultimately bring good from it. For in everything, God works for good with those who love Him. Third, we must pray for the selection of good cardinals and that they seek and heed God's guidance during the conclave. Pope Francis's health and leadership. Despite advanced age and health issues, such as breathing with one lung and mobility problems due to sciatica and a bad knee, Pope Francis continues his duties with determination. This has led to speculation about his potential resignation, similar to Benedict XVI. Pope Francis's ability to maintain his leadership despite physical limitations underscores his resilience and commitment. His health challenges have not deterred him from his mission, reflecting his deep sense of duty and spiritual dedication. His perseverance highlights the importance of inner strength and faith in overcoming physical adversities. Controversy and predictions surrounding Pope Francis. The prophecy of the 112th Pope, often attributed to Saint Malachy, a 12th century Archbishop of Armagh, has stirred considerable interest and debate. This prophecy suggests that Pope Francis, being the 112th Pope, might be the last, leading the Church through a period of great tribulation. The prophecy describes the final Pope as Peter the Roman, who will shepherd his flock amidst many tribulations until the destruction of the seven-hilled city, Rome, and the final judgment. However, interpretations of this prophecy vary widely. Some view these predictions as signs of imminent end times, while others see them as symbolic or not literally applicable to current events. This divergence in interpretations reflects broader uncertainties within the Church and among believers. Pope Francis, born João Maria Bergoglio, chose his papal name in honor of Saint Francis of Assisi. Some argue that this choice aligns with the prophecy's description of the final Pope as Peter the Roman, given that Saint Francis's father's name was Pietro or Peter. However, this connection is speculative and not universally accepted. The prophecy of Saint Malachy has been influential in some Catholic circles for centuries, despite not being officially approved by the magisterium. Its authenticity has been questioned, particularly given that it was not published until 1595, several centuries after Saint Malachy's death. Some historians suggest that the prophecy may have been a 16th century forgery created around the time of its publication. Despite these controversies, the prophecy continues to intrigue many, particularly in light of Pope Francis's papacy. His emphasis on humility, service, and love for the poor resonates with the prophecy's depiction of the final pope leading his flock through tribulations. Furthermore, Pope Francis has spoken about faith being increasingly pushed out of the public square and the persecution of Christians, which some interpret as aligning with the prophecy's predictions. However, whether Pope Francis signifies the final pope remains unresolved. The fulfillment of prophecies, particularly those with cryptic or symbolic language, often remains unclear until after events have unfolded. As such, only time will tell how these prophecies will be fulfilled, if at all. In the meantime, The prophecy of the 112th Pope serves as a reminder of the enduring mysteries of faith. It invites believers and scholars alike to reflect on the nature of prophecy, the role of the Pope, and the future of the Church, regardless of one's interpretation of the prophecy. Pope Francis's leadership continues to inspire many, guiding the Church in a time of both challenges and opportunities. Pope Francis's humility and Jesuit background. Pope Francis, known for his humility and dedication to social justice, exemplifies these values through his modest lifestyle and advocacy for the underprivileged. His background as a Jesuit significantly influences his papacy, with an emphasis on traditional Catholic teachings and social justice. His Jesuit education instilled in him a deep sense of service, intellectual rigor, and a preferential option for the poor. These principles are evident in his initiatives to address economic inequality, promote environmental stewardship, and foster interfaith dialogue. His leadership style is characterized by mercy, compassion, and a pastoral approach aiming to bring the Church closer to the marginalized and to manifest the gospel in everyday actions. The role of the Pope in Catholicism is significant and multifaceted. As the Bishop of Rome, the Pope is the head of the Holy See, the central government of the Roman Catholic Church. He makes decisions on issues of faith and morality for Catholics worldwide. The Pope serves as the earthly shepherd for the spiritual and moral beliefs of the Catholic faithful. He guides his flock through speeches and writings, often addressing matters of social concern and global impact. The Pope's immense responsibility, coupled with his commitment to humility and social justice, makes Pope Francis a unique figure in the Catholic Church. His leadership continues to inspire many, guiding the Church in a time of both challenges. And for more information on the significance of the Pope in Catholicism, you can refer to the provided source. Why do we have a Pope? Jesus had many followers who learned from him, but he worked most intimately with 12. These 12 were sent on a specific apostolic mission after being trained by Christ himself. Among them, 3 were in his closest inner circle. Each of these 3 was given a special role in the Church. Peter was the rock on which Jesus would build his Church. Just as every group needs a leader, someone to cast the deciding vote, so did the apostles and the bishops. Simon Peter, the fisherman, rose to the occasion. In his lineage are popes who became saints and others who were less saintly. Yet each pope was given special authority by God to guide the Church for a time. As humans, everyone has sins, including Peter and his successors. Why would Jesus entrust his Church to humans, to sinners? Jesus knew that people would sin. He knows all as he is God. The Church, like Jesus Christ, is both human and divine. While the Church is divinely fueled, guided by the Holy Spirit, and perfect in her teachings, it is still composed of imperfect humans. Sin exists in the pews and in the sacristies. Even when leaders sin, it does not make God's laws or truths any less valid. Christ knew Peter's imperfections, but still chose him for the crucial task of guiding the Church on earth. And so I say to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my Church, and the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. The moment Jesus changes Simon's name to Peter is significant. A name change signifies a change in a person's essence. While rock referred to God and Abraham in the Old Testament, Peter is the only person designated as the rock by Christ. This designation did not make Peter divine, but it came with divine assistance promised by Jesus. Jesus promises that the netherworld will not prevail against the Church. So will evil never prevail against the Church? People point to modern problems within the Church or scandals as proof that Christ was referring to himself as the Church. This is not true. Battles may be lost, but never the war. The Church will always prevail as Christ promises. Jesus gives Peter the keys. The keys not only let people in, but also lock people out, signifying power. This action is also biblical, as seen in Isaiah 22, where the Prime Minister of Israel is given the keys and the power to govern God's people on earth. What Jesus was doing was both a landmark for the future and rooted in the past. Luke 10:16 states, "Whoever listens to you listens to me. Whoever rejects you rejects me, and whoever rejects me rejects the one who sent me. Jesus gives Peter the power to bind and loose. What does that mean? Sacramental power through confession and reconciliation. How would Peter, the apostles, or any priest know which sins to bind or loose if they had not heard the sins first? Jesus is very clear. They have authority on earth that counts in heaven. Since Peter was martyred, we have been blessed with an unbroken apostolic succession. This is why we have had a successor to the chair of Peter ever since his crucifixion. Some claim that the church at times had multiple popes, but this is not. There have been times when more than one person claimed to be the pontiff, but there has only been one true pope at a time. Does God pick the pope? When a pope is chosen, people often announce him as God's choice, speaking as if the Holy Spirit himself selects the pope. This language is customary and understandable as a way of building confidence for the new pontificate, but is it literally true? Does the Holy Spirit really select the best man? The cardinals in a conclave certainly invoke the Holy Spirit and seek his guidance, but he does not override their free will. So in what sense can the election of a pope be said to be God's will? Everything that happens in history takes place under God's providential care. By his omnipotence, God could stop any event from occurring. If something happens, it is because God allows it. The election of a pope can thus be said to be God's will in the same sense as any historical event. However, the fact that something is God's will does not guarantee he approves of it. It may be God's will to allow a man to commit adultery, but that doesn't mean he approves of the act. Is the election of a pope in accord with God's will only in this minimal sense, or does it involve something greater? Although God does not override human free will, he offers guidance. Jesus gave the church certain promises in this regard, stating, when the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all the truth. God has promised to give the church his guidance and has also promised it to individuals. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives to all men generously and without reproaching, and it will be given him. If an individual seeks God's guidance, he can count on it being given. This does not mean it will be easy to hear or understand, or that the person will act on it, but it does mean that God will offer his assistance in some way. Similarly, when the College of Cardinals seeks God's guidance in a conclave, they can be confident he will give it. Given the weightiness of the decision and its implications for the entire church, they can expect even greater guidance. This does not guarantee that the guidance will be easy to hear or understand, or that the cardinals will act on it, but it does mean that God's assistance will be provided. By presuming the discernment and goodwill of the cardinals, we may presume that the man they elect was chosen in accord with God's guidance, making his election God's will in a greater way than if God merely allowed it. We should be careful about assuming there is only one correct choice for pope. The process of selecting a pope is similar to selecting a spouse. Pop culture sometimes promotes the idea that everyone has a soulmate, a single best individual they should marry, but the reality is more complex. Each marriage prospect has different strengths and weaknesses, and depending on whom you choose, your marriage will unfold in different ways. That doesn't mean there is one best candidate you must find. Even if there were, identifying that person with confidence is impossible due to numerous factors. Similarly, candidates for the papacy have different strengths and weaknesses. Depending on whom the cardinals choose, the next papacy will unfold differently. There may not be a single best choice or one that is humanly knowable. Once a selection is made, however, a new mode of divine will comes into play. In marriage, once you exchange vows, it is God's will that you treat that person as your spouse. The realm of possibilities before marriage reduces to a single person, your divinely ordained spouse. God ordains that you be spouses at the moment. The vows are exchanged, and what God has joined together, let man not separate. It's now your job to make the marriage work, not to worry about what ifs. Similarly, when a man accepts his election as pope, he becomes the divinely ordained pope. And it's everyone's job in the church to support him in the various ways appropriate to their station to make the papacy work. Spouses are not perfect, and neither are popes. Just as every marriage has challenges and requires work, so does every papacy. Nobody knows when the next conclave will be, but we can draw several implications. First, we can be confident that the cardinals seek God's guidance and that he will give it to them. as He has promised. Second, even if they make a suboptimal choice, we can be confident that God will ultimately bring good from it. For in everything, God works for good with those who love Him. Third, we need to pray. We need to pray now that good cardinals will be chosen, and when they meet in conclave, we need to pray that they will earnestly seek and heed God's guidance. That marks the end of today's video. If you watch our content, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our latest releases.